Generally, most of us tend to say whenever the animal is having anorexia or anything like that, that liver is the one which is responsible for it. Because, we talk so much about liver, but we know very little about liver most of the times. That's what, in my opinion, if I'm wrong, please forgive me. We never ever try and go in detail to study the differential diagnosis of liver diseases. Probably because we have less facilities for diagnosing etiological diagnosis, based diagnosis. That is one of the most probable cause why we don't really care to diagnose liver disease. If you ask anybody in the veterinary career, or if you can ask yourself, how many cases of liver disease you know that you have diagnosed in your career? Probably be very less. And most of the times, whenever there is jaundice, we always say it's liver is, the one which is responsible. Or whenever there is ascites, invariably 99.9% we say liver is responsible for ascites. But whereas these clinical symptoms such as ascites and jaundice can always and most often is because of another other problem. For example, ascites, most often it is due to post-hepatic portal hypertension. It's due to cardiac disease. And very, very few cases we will come across of, hepatic causes of ascites. Similarly, in jaundice too, most often it will be prehepatic, hemolytic jaundice, most often. Very rarely you get intrahepatic cholestasis and jaundice, very, very rare. And it's also rare to see obstructive liver disease and jaundice. Okay. I'm saying, so we have always, a wrong diagnosis for the right clinical signs. And for the non-specific clinical signs, we always attribute liver as a cause. So probably this, program, this seminar can slightly throw open, to more diagnostic futures of liver disease. So first thing what we should remember is the liver is called the carburetor of the body. It's got multifunctional. That is the main organ which coordinates so many metabolic functions. Be carbohydrate metabolism, be it protein metabolism, be it fat metabolism, be it storage. It's a storage house for so many proteins. It manufactures so many proteins like albumin and clotting factors. It is responsible for very many absorptions like vitamin K. It is also involved in immunity systems. So invariably, it is there in all the system. It is, got a role to play. You are vomiting, you have bleeding tendencies. All these things will be there. And sometimes, there are clinical signs, as I already told you in my introductory subject, which may not be due to liver disease like ascites and jaundice. Okay, so there are a lot of non-specific clinical signs associated with liver disease. No pathognomonic symptoms. You can't say this sign is there, so it is liver is diseased. You can't say like that. Yeah, and you have similar signs in primary and secondary disease. A lot of secondary diseases which also can mimic hepatic disease. For example, hyperadenocarditism. It also shows serum alkaline phosphatase increase. It also shows ALT increase. All these signs are seen in hyperadenocarditism. So primary and secondary hepatic diseases, another two things which make it difficult to understand about hepatic diseases. So what are the consequences of hepatic dysfunction or, hepatic functional derangement? What are the things? Usually it should be widespread to cause a functional dysfunction. Okay? If it is a focal disease, it may not cause a dysfunction. And acute lesions always regenerate. That is one capacity of the liver which makes it, easy for the body to cope up with. Whatever insult, whatever injury the liver has got, it can regenerate very, very fast. That is the reason we don't see very many liver diseases in our day-to-day practice. Only the chronic lesions, chronic injuries, they alone will go into fatty liver. If unchecked, goes in for necrosis. A group of hepatocytes which necrose form fibrosis, scar tissue. And if not stopped at this stage, it becomes cirrhotic. Cirrhotic is a non-regenerative end-stage liver disease. So likewise, what are the consequences of liver disease? One is increase in bilirubin. Okay, so bilirubin, you know how it is formed from the lysed RBCs. Bilirubin comes to the liver where it gets conjugated and gets excreted. Okay, so increase in bilirubin, you always is a hallmark of hepatic, pre-hepatic, hepatic, and post-hepatic disease. We will see how to interpret the results of bilirubin later. But you should know that increase in bilirubin, serum bilirubin, is diagnostic of pre-hepatic, hepatic, and post-hepatic. There were times when they were trying to, read in between, conjugated versus unconjugated, ratio of conjugated or unconjugated. So those are all those things that is called Vandenberg test. They have no say in the present days. So there can be a lot of confusion in that. So it is not done that way. Next is bile acids. So bile acids are another thing which is very important, and it increases in portosystemic shunts and it decreases in steatorrhea. So we will see what are the bile acid consequences of bile acids. What are the metabolic consequences? They have severe hypoglycemia because in hepatic disease, glycogen store is reduced, gluconeogenesis is affected, insulin degradation is affected, and in end-stage liver disease, there is always hypoglycemia. And hypoalbuminemia. Albumin is always produced in the liver. So whenever the albumin is very less, you find that it is because of liver disease, and that too only at end stages you find. But we also have to always have in mind, aside hypoalbuminemia occurs also in other diseases like protein losing enteropathy or protein losing gastrointestinal loss, all those things. So how to differentiate that, we will be seeing it. So circulation, it has got its consequences in circulation. So what is ascites? Ascites, it is due to two things. One is due to oncotic pressure and another is due to hydrostatic pressure. These two things are the one which produces ascites. Oncotic pressure is purely because of protein. So whenever albumin is less in the circulation, you get reduction in oncotic pressure. Because of that, you get ascites. Okay, so it can be protein losing nephropathy. It can be protein losing enteropathy, or it can be because of end-stage liver disease where there is no albumin. So all these three conditions, you can have ascites due to oncotic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure. What is hydrostatic pressure? It is a pressure existing in the splanchnic circulation. All the blood vessels, from the spleen, from the intestines, large intestines, they all join as a vena cava and go to the portal vein, go to the liver, gets detoxified. The nutrients are all absorbed in the liver and then goes through the vena cava into the heart, right side of the heart for general circulation. So this flow of blood is under a constant pressure. It's called hydrostatic pressure. Which part there is going to be obstruction, the pressure is going to increase. If it is before the liver, it is called prehepatic portal hypertension. So it can be due to various block in the abdominal vein. It can be a thrombus, it can be a AV fistula, it can be a tumor obstructing, it can be an intraluminal tumor. All these things can obstruct the blood flowing in the blood to the liver. That is called prehepatic portal hypertension. When there is obstruction to flow of blood in the liver, is called hepatic portal hypertension. Usually due to severe, inflammation of the hepatocytes or, severe cirrhosis. All these things, they will crush the hepatic vein passing through that. That is, the portal triad is there. That will get compressed and you will have increase in hydrostatic pressure. This is called hepatic portal hypertension. This is again a very small ratio of cases you will see in your practice. Then the blood going from out of the liver into the heart, through the vena cava. If it is going to be obstructed, it's called post-hepatic portal hypertension. This is the most important cause for ascites. So it can be a congestive heart failure, it can be a vegetative endocarditis, it can be a mitral stenosis. So many causes where there is, flow obstruction into the heart and outside the heart, out to the heart. So whatever happens, that's called post-hepatic portal hypertension. So this is what is called as post-hepatic portal hypertension. Then portosystemic shunt. What is shunt? This splanchnic vessels, instead of going through the liver, it bypasses the liver and goes to the heart. This is what is called portosystemic shunt. This I also doubt very much whether we diagnose in India, though there are several instances where we have seen somebody reporting it. I personally have a feeling that it is not being done in the way it has to be done. So it is a shunting vessel which causes this disease. So it can be a congenital portosystemic shunt, or it can be a acquired shunt in a case of cirrhosis and things. It can be a extrahepatic shunt, or it can be an intrahepatic. We'll see what it is later. But generally, what is the consequence of hepatic disease? It as a consequence of circulation. Detoxification. One of the most important work of the liver is to detoxify. So hepatic encephalopathy. So there are a lot of products which come to the liver without being, when it is dysfunctional, it cannot detoxify, like urea, like mercaptans. All these things it cannot detoxify because its function is less. So it invariably, all these products get entry into the circulation, go to the brain and cause hepatic encephalopathy. And most important thing, we should remember that whenever the liver is dysfunctional, drug metabolism is affected. So whatever drugs you choose in an animal with liver disease, you should know about their clearing mechanism, and wherever required, the drug dosage should be halved, reduced, so that it doesn't put extra efforts on the liver, which is already diseased. So other consequences of bleeding. So I told you clotting factors, mainly factor 2, factor 7, factor 9, factor 10, and protein C. They're all produced in the liver. So when these clotting factors are deficient, you have a bleeding tendency. And most important thing, through bile, bile is important for vitamin K absorption. Whenever there is a cholestatic disease, vitamin K malabsorption can occur. Again, can cause severe bleeding disease. Portal hypertension. I told you this portal hypertension, because of severe cirrhosis or anything like that, can cause varicose veins like human beings, which is very rare in dogs, but still it can cause portal hypertension and cause GI bleeds. So remember about bleeding in a liver disease. Polyuria, polydipsia, though the clinical signs are sometimes seen in liver disease, is a bit rare. So what are the liver diseases? So Wasawa has classified liver disease, categorized them into 4 main groups. One is a parenchymal disease, another is the neoplastic disease, another biliary diseases, and fourth one is a vascular disorders. So we will have to divide them into that. I'm not going into details of what are the different types of diseases and things like that. But generally, parenchymal disease, like chronic active hepatitis, hepatic dysfunctions, toxicosis, all these things all come in some parenchymal disease. A lot of tumors, primary and secondary tumors, and biliary disorders are mucocele or cyst or biliary sludge or biliary stones. All these things can be in the biliary tract. And vascular problems can be because of congestive heart failures or due to portovenic cavernous shunts. These are all vascular problems which is going to cause liver disease. So history is very, very important. The onset of the disease, clinical signs, they are all very, very important. Signalement again is very important. Age, breed. Certain breeds are highly prone for certain disease. All terriers and small toy breeds are highly associated with portovenic cavernous shunts. So whenever you get a terrier or a small breed dog with severe convulsions in the age of 2 months to 3 months, you should always suspect portovenic cavernous shunts. Especially after a protein meal, if they have seizures, it is because of portovenic cavernous shunt. And dogs like Bedlington Terriers, they have copper storage disease. Dogs like Doberman, Labrador Retrievers, Golden Retrievers, They've got secondary copper storage disease. There are a lot of difference between primary copper storage disease, which is not seen in other breeds, secondary copper storage disease. Whenever there is liver dysfunction, copper is not cleared from the liver. So they cause toxicity. This is secondary copper storage disease. So whenever such breeds come, you'll always think about liver disease. Chronic active hepatitis, again, very, very commonly seen in Dobermans. So these are things which we should remember while taking the Signalmet. Clinical signs, as I already told you, it's so varying between anorexia, vomiting, diarrhea, pain, abdominal pain, and, jaundice and ascites and, bleeding disorders. So it varies a lot.
Hatfield Pharma introduces Heparaj Plus tablets. L-ornithine, L-aspartate 250 mg, thiamine mononitrate 1.5 mg, riboflavin 1.5 mg, pyridoxine hydrochloride 1.5 mg, nicotinamide 20 mg, calcium, D-pantothenate 5 mg, silymarin 100 mg, and folic acid 1 mg. Multivitamin supplement with the power of silymarin. Heparaj Plus tablets. Hepatoprotectant systemic drug. Indications: supplement to support healthy growth, general weakness and debility, geriatric support, chronic and acute liver disease, cirrhosis, hepatoprotective agent when hepatotoxic agents are ingested, example death cap mushrooms, beneficial in preventing certain cancers and improving the efficacy and reducing the negative effects of chemotherapy for certain tumors. Dosage: for small breeds, 1 tablet per day. Medium and large breeds, 1 tablet twice a day. Route: oral. Presentation: 1 into 10 tablets. You can book your order online at www.hatfit.com. Looking forward to a long-lasting business association. Thank you.
So diagnosis of liver disease basically based on clinical examination. First, icterus you see, the scleral jaundice and ascites. Ballotment of abdomen, you can find out it's got ascites. And palpation is very, very important. Hepatomegaly, usually on all congestive diseases and the diffuse hepatic diseases, you will have hepatomegaly. Pain on palpation, ascites. Again, by palpation, you can find out ascites. Femoral pulse and cardiological examination is very, very, very important because these can be the main reason for causing secondary changes in the liver, like congestive diseases of the liver and cause dysfunction liver. So we always take the femoral pulse and cardiological examination, thorough cardiological examination. Then, of course, we have a regular biochemical examination, which is very, very important. But again, this is, we should know how to interpret the results. Generally, veterinarians, we always want to extrapolate directly from the pathology report, whether it is increased or decreased. It is not like that. You should see what are the nuances of, reading a report. So that is very important. So mainly they are divided into those that evaluate injury to the liver. See, certain toxins can cause injury to hepatocytes. Okay, immediately there will be a lot of enzyme increase. Doesn't mean that the liver is diseased. For example, in our one way you see, supposing we have an alcoholic drink for a special occasion. The next day morning, if you look at the your blood biochemistry, definitely there will be increase in ALT. Does it mean that your liver is diseased? No. It is a single time injury and there is an elaboration of this enzyme because of that injury, and that doesn't mean that the liver is dysfunctional. Okay, so you should always evaluate very carefully when you are evaluating these tests which evaluate the injury, and those that evaluate function. These are all very important because once the functional capability of the liver is gone, then only you find this test giving you results. More than 75% of the liver's capacity is gone. Then only you get all this positive results for these function tests. These are all very important. So what are the collection tips? It's very important. You see, it's a responsibility of the veterinarian to give a proper blood sample to a pathology lab or to a pathologist for getting a full outcome of the results. So avoid hemolysis. Hemolysis falsely increased values. Aged samples, you should not give aged samples. Again, that alters lot of parameters. Icteric samples will give you erroneous results. Lipemic sample will reduce most of the values. Insufficient samples. See, you have a citrate vial, which should fill in about 5 ml of blood. If you fill in 2 ml of blood, that means it's an insufficient sample. So again, you will get erroneous results. So you should be very, very careful in collecting blood and giving it for, lab. For example, ammonia you want to do. Of course, most of us, I don't think anybody, for my opinion, nobody does ammonia because it should be iced and it should be done within 30 minutes. I don't know. Nobody does. Just most important in, liver disease. Bile acids, again, nobody does. No pathology lab does. Even human lab doesn't do bile acids. Only IDEX laboratories, they have the capabilities of doing bile acids. And none of the veterinarians, we perform bile acids and ammonia, which two are the most sensitive and specific tests in small animal liver disease. Okay, next is evaluation as injury. I told you these tests will tell you that there is an injury, like alanine aminotransferase, previously called SGPT, then alanine aminotransferase, SGOT, then alkaline phosphatase is a cholestatic enzyme, GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase, again, a cholestatic enzyme. Both alkaline phosphatase and GGT are concerned with biliary tract. First is serum bilirubin. I already told you. So prehepatic jaundice, the hematocrit is always very less. You have a very low PCV, very low RBC. That is evidence of some bleeding. That is the reason you have low hematocrit, low PCV, low hemoglobin, and things like that. There is increase in serum bilirubin. There is increase in bilirubinuria. That is, the urine is high colored, orange colored or high colored. So you have bilirubin in the urine. You have increased urobilinogen in the urine, and many times you get to see hemoglobinuria because of hemolytic, IMH, immune-mediated hemolytic anemia, or babesiosis. You might find hemoglobinuria, you may not find hemoglobinuria, but one of the findings is hemoglobinuria. Then serum bilirubin is also increased in hepatic diseases. Increased bilirubin is seen in hepatic diseases. Along with the bilirubin, you also find ALT increasing because liver enzymes are also increased. You have bilirubinuria and increased urobilinogen. Okay? So, but there is no system where it can, differentiate between prehepatic and hepatic. Serum bilirubin cannot. So you require other tests to find out what it is. Hey, supposing you have, serum bilirubin is increased. Find out if the hematocrit is very low. Then it could be possibly be prehepatic. If it is not that, probably it can be, hepatic. In post-hepatic, there are some more tests which will give you a differentiate between hepatic and post-hepatic. This is how, serum bilirubin can be interpreted, not alone. Serum bilirubin alone will not give you any indication of what is ongoing disease. Obstructive disease, also serum bilirubin increases. There you find also increased alkaline phosphatase because of cholestasis. Okay, there'll be a 10-fold to 100-fold increase in serum alkaline phosphatase. If it is intrahepatic, there'll be 10-fold. If it is extrahepatic, there'll be 100 times more ALP. Increased bilirubin in urine. One most important thing, urine has no urobilinogen. This is very, very important. Okay, because there is obstruction, the bile duct is not connected, so the bilirubin doesn't come to the intestines for getting into circulobininogen. So alcoholic feces, no urobilinogen, and increased bilirubin, increased ALP and cholestasis is characteristic of obstructive hepatic disease, where you get increased serum bilirubin. So alanine aminotransferase, I told you, ALT. I told you why we should not take only the increase in value as a sign of disease. So because these enzymes are immediately, cytosolic enzymes are immediately released into the bloodstream, and they also are elaborated during repair. So a single increase in ALT values, you don't know whether it is undergoing repair or whether it is undergoing necrosis. So it is very important. You should do 2 or 3 consequent evaluation, and if you find they are going to increase, then you think there's going to be an ongoing hepatic damage. So that is very important. It also increases due to steroids and anticonvulsants. There are a lot of drugs which are going to increase the ALT. Okay, and how you should interpret the results. A mild increase in ALT with a normal AST, some called mild damage. Pronounced ALT, high increase in ALT with a moderate AST, that means it's got a moderate damage, liver damage. A mild ALT with a pronounced AST says it's got a muscle damage. So whenever you find ALT, you should be able to differentiate whether it is a muscle problem or whether it is from a liver problem, whether it is a mild damage or a moderate damage, whether it is having ongoing necrosis or whether it is a single insult, all these things, or whether it is due to drugs. So many things you have to think while interpreting the results of ALT. ALT is also increased in cardiac disease. They're called bystanders. So you should know that any increase in ALT, so many other things also you should take into consideration. Alkaline phosphatase. Alkaline phosphatase, as I already told you, is a cholestatic enzyme. But also there are different fractions of alkaline phosphatase. You find them in liver disease, you find them in intestinal disease, you find them in bone, growing bone or bone diseases. Okay, mild and diabetes mellitus, pyometra, all these conditions you have increase in alkaline phosphatase. But what is very important is it is tenfold increased in intrahepatic cholestasis. Whenever you have a chronic hepatitis, the hepatocytes are swollen, they compress the bile duct and cause intrahepatic cholestasis, which gives 10 times more values. Extrahepatic, when there is obstruction to the main bile duct, then it has 100-fold increase in alkaline phosphatase. Okay? And it is also increased in steroids, and it is also increased in hyperadenocorticism, Cushing's disease. Gamma glutamyl transferase. This again is very, very important. It's very, very specific for cats, but it's also good for in dogs, because when you have alkaline phosphatase increased, you do not know whether it is due to bone or is it due to intestine. And if you have gamma glutamyl transferase, if both alkaline phosphatase and gamma glutamyl transferase are increased, then it is surely due to liver only, because they do not have a bone fraction or intestinal fraction, and they do not increase based on steroids, or they do not increase based on anticonvulsive drugs. So gamma glutamyl transferase is very specific for cholestatic disease. It is definitely indicative of obstructive cholestatic disease, and very, very good for felines, and is also okay for dogs. And when ammonia metabolism is affected also, these values of gamma glutamyl transferase is very much reduced. Okay? And the normal values does not rule out shunts. Serum protein. So whenever serum protein is less, you should find out what is the fraction of albumin and globulin. Typically in liver disease, you get hypoalbuminemia with hypergamma-globulinemia. Okay, so the total protein may not change much, but your albumin will be very much reduced most of the times. And this is also seen in other diseases like protein-losing enteropathy and all, blood loss, all those things also you see like that. But we should know how to differentiate them with other tests. So increase in globulin is all, I told you, increase in gamma globulins is there in serum protein. Cholesterol. This is a secondary test for liver disorders. So whenever there is a liver disease, you have loss of appetite. Because of that, you have low cholesterol. It is not a prime test, but it also gives you indications. It is increase in decrease excretion. Biliary stasis, it is increased because cholesterol is metabolized by the bile duct. So whenever there is biliary stasis, cholesterol is going to increase in the serum. Okay, always you should remember that Cushing's and diabetics also you will have cholesterol increase, but you should know that hepatic enzymes also will increase in such of those conditions. Ammonia tolerance test. Okay, this is again is a test which is not being done much in India, and mostly it's very carefully done because whenever you suspect a liver disease, they have ammonia intolerance, they cause toxicity. So giving ammonia injection and causing test usually is not very strong, but anyway, ammonia tolerance test purely to find out whether liver is able to convert this ammonia into urea. So that is a test of ammonia tolerance test. It is increased in liver disease. It's increased in portovenic covered shunts. Very, very, very important. Fasting ammonia, if it is going to be increased, it is very characteristic of portovenic covered shunt. Only most important thing in congenital portovenic covered shunt. Only most important thing, the sample should be collected and stored in ice and should be tested for ammonia within 30 minutes. This is the most important thing in testing for shunts with ammonia. Here you don't give ammonia, injectable. You can straight away go for fasting ammonia, and if it is very increased, then it has got a congenital portovenic covered shunt. Serum bile acids, again very specific for liver disease. In liver diseases and portovenic covered shunts, you have increase in bile acids. You have to do a fasting blood sugar, blood bile acids level. And after giving a small amount of food, you should not give too much food. If you give too much of food, there can be vigorous contraction of gallbladder and bile acids can increase. So give a small quantity of food, and after 2 hours, again look for serum bile acids. If it is preprandial and postprandial increased, then it's 100% specific for shunts. Fasting, if it is more than 25 millimoles per liter, and postprandial, if it is more than 30 millimoles per liter, it's a classical sign of portovenic covered shunt. So if you want to diagnose portovenic covered shunt, the only test we can do is ammonia, serum ammonia, and serum bile acids, preprandial and postprandial serum bile acids. You have no other test which can find out diagnose this disease. The other way is, you can do ultrasound. Ultrasound is not, again, very difficult, very, very skilled persons can only diagnose shunts with ultrasound. Of course, 80 to 85% you can diagnose extrahepatic, and 100% you can diagnose intrahepatic based on ultrasound, but you require a lot of skill for that. The other way is doing contrast. You do a jejunal injection of contrast agent and take an X-ray and find out shunt.
Hatred Pharma introduces Rantiraj tablets. Ranitidine hydrochloride 25 mg. Ideal antacid with the strength as per dose requirements of our pet clients. Ranitidine hydrochloride tablets. Rantiraj tablets. H2 receptor antagonist prokinetic systemic drug. Indications: erosive gastritis and esophageal reflux. Dosage for dogs: 1 to 2 mg per kg twice a day. For cats, 3.5 mg per kg twice a day. Route: oral. Presentation: 1 into 10 tablets. You can book your order online at www.hatwit.com. Looking forward to a long-lasting business association. Thank you.
That is a classical gold standard that you should do even if you diagnose shunts by serum bile acids and ammonia. Even then, when you are going to do surgical management, at that time you'll have to cannulate the jejunal vein and inject the contrast material and take X-ray to find out which vessel is shunting, and so that you should ligate that shunting vessel to treat portovenic caval shunt. So you require all these tests to diagnose portovenic caval shunts. The pretenders, as I already told you, these are the pretenders. You have increase in ALT and ALP in pancreatitis, in diabetes mellitus, in hyperthyroidism. So whenever you have increase in ALT and ALP, don't forget these diseases other than liver, which can cause increase in ALT and ALP. Bilirubin, most important, anorexia, catabolic state, and infection. Any infection can cause increase in bilirubin. Especially anorexia in horses. If the horse is not eating for 3 days, you will have jaundice. Doesn't mean you will have to jump to conclusion that the equine is suffering from hepatic jaundice. Even simple anorexia in horse, you will have jaundice. So you have to always remember bilirubin, because of all this state which is not involving the liver can cause increase in bilirubin. ALT, I already told you, is increase in cardiac diseases. So all diseases where you have congestive cardiac diseases, you can have increase in ALT. ALP with ALT, very, very pathognomonic and hyperadenocortism, Cushing's disease. Very, very classical, both ALP and ALT. So you should be very, very careful in diagnosing ALP and ALT. These are all called pretenders. Ultrasound. As I told you, ultrasound, basic liver ultrasonography is very, very easy for a beginner. It's not at all difficult. You can see the parenchyma, you can see the gallbladder, you can see the outline border, and you can diagnose very many diseases. Even if it is for the first time you are handling, probe and looking at the liver, you can diagnose very many diseases. Definitely, you can diagnose the solid cystic, structures like tumors, cystic conditions, gallbladder stones. These are all not at all difficult. So we should have regular usage of ultrasound to start slowly increasing our skill to diagnose very many diseases. Gradually, if you are using on a regular basis, if you are using ultrasound, you can diagnose very many conditions of liver based on ultrasound. So basically, you should understand what are the structures involved, the different lobes. You should try and see all lobes, because there can be a compartmentalized disease when it is a solitary lesion. It can be only in single lobe. A hematoma, a cyst, can be only in a single lobe. So you cannot say that it is there or not there by seeing one field. So you should see there are so many lobes here. Then you have caudal vena cava, you got portal vein, you got artery, hepatic artery. All these structures we should be able to see. Bile duct, and bile duct, the opening of the duodenum. There are papillae. So sometimes duodenal problem can cause obstructive, so you should know how to go about it. So when I'm doing ultrasound of the picture, you should try and do. Usually, it's in the ventral abdomen. You have to divide the ventral abdomen to 9 equal parts. Okay, the right quadrant is where the liver is. Right quadrant, right epigastric quadrant, and right lateral quadrant. These are the places where you find liver. Okay, you can see in those places for liver. Left side, you can see a spleen. You can compare splenic architecture with the liver architecture and renal architecture and say whether it's hypoechoic, hyperechoic, or anechoic. Very important to compare these three structures, because in the setup you have in your ultrasound, the light source may be intensity may be varying. So you cannot say hyperechoic, hypoechoic based on that. When you compare the same light source for all the three organs, the same dog, then it'll be easy for you to say whether it is hyperechoic or hypoechoic or isoechoic. There are two major blood vessels entering the liver: the portal vein from this splanchnic area, which comes to the liver, very important to see this vessel, because pre-hepatic portal hypertension you can diagnose by seeing this vessel thoroughly. You can find out if they got AV fistula, if they got embolism, whether there's entry of some other blood vessels and causing shunts. All these things you will be able to see when you're seeing this blood vessel. The hepatic artery carries oxygen-rich blood to liver from the heart to the lungs, and this is the artery you cannot find out in the ultrasound. So ultrasound technique, scan it placed directly under the sternum. As I told you, in the epigastric area, that is, I told you the ventral part is divided into 9 equal parts, and the center part is the sternum. They can angle it cranially, almost like you are aiming for the heart. Begin in the transverse scan plan and set depth to see the diaphragm echogenic line. So set the ultrasound light mode to see the diaphragm echogenic line. Then switch to sagittal to see all the lobes. Intercostal techniques also is important, used to further visualize liver lobes, often used in deep-chested dog, where in between intercostal space, you can put the probe and see the liver. Because, it's very important to look at the liver, because, one classical example I'll tell you. We had a case from Hyderabad reporting to us over telephone saying that it has got a liver tumor. The whole abdomen has got a liver tumor. Throughout the liver is affected. And the client wanted to bring it to veterinary college to Chennai. I said, no, what is the point in bringing? Because no point in bringing such a tumor, liver tumor, you can't do anything about it. The next day, the dog came by road. They said they want to bring it and get a final report. They came and we did ultrasound. The moment we keep the probe, is all tumors. And we tested, and then we took blood sample for all the parameters, blood parameters. And the next day, the results came and the owner came together. What was very interesting was all the enzyme levels and all the biomarkers were all normal. Then I said, no, we'll have to look at the ultrasound again. When we looked at the ultrasound again, it was a splenic tumor completely covering the whole abdomen and the liver. And therefore, we are not able to see the liver, and we thought it is liver tumor. Then when we saw intercostal, when we are able to see the liver, which is normal. Then we did splenectomy and the dog survived for another 9 months. So this is very important. So you will have to see both the spleen and kidney and liver, you will have to see in a plane while you are doing an ultrasound. So this is the Sven dorsal, kept in dorsal recumbency, and you can see the xiphoid cartilage. You can the moment you keep in the angle of the two ribs and the xiphoid cartilage directing the beams cranially, you will find liver. Absolutely, you can't miss it at all. You can also do an animal which is lateral recumbency. After all, what is required is that cranial direction. That also can be done. And probably this dog has got some ascites. What we see visibly is got ascites. And when you are seeing ascites, all the more it will be liver will be highly demarcated, very easy to see. So size of the liver is assessed subjectively. Okay, it's not, there are no measurements to say that it has got hepatomegaly, but generally based on subjective assessment, you can say hepatomegaly. Of course, you're also going to palpate and see hepatomegaly. So parenchymatous disease is a homogeneous and uniform, interpreted only by portal and hepatic veins. Portal veins have echogenic walls. It's very important. Understand that portal veins have echogenic walls. Hepatic veins do not have walls. They have like a black tubes. Hepatic arteries are not seen. So this is very important. Portal veins have echogenic walls, and hepatic veins do not have walls. They just have a black tubes. So spleen echogenicity is higher, hyperechoic than liver. Liver's echogenicity is higher than kidney. So this you always have to compare whenever you look at the ultrasound. And the texture is more coarse texture than spleen. Portal veins more echogenic than hepatic veins due to surrounding fatty issues, less visible with shunts, fibrosis, and cirrhosis. This is very, very important. They are less visible during shunts, fibrosis, and cirrhosis. You get more points while you are looking at shunts. Hepatic veins, best seen cranially near diaphragm, emptying into the vena cava. Walls are not visible. But what is very important, these hepatic and portal veins should be thoroughly followed till the kidneys so that any vessel which is joining them, you'll be able to see, and that can be a shunting vessel. So hepatic ultrasound is very useful in diagnosing solid and cystic diseases, focal and diffuse diseases, portovenocaval shunts, biliary stenosis, tumors, hepatic lipidosis, hepatomegaly, cirrhosis. All these diseases you can comfortably diagnose with hepatic ultrasound. Hepatomegaly, if you find hepatomegaly in ultrasound, it can be steroid-induced hepatopathy. It can be because of lipidosis. Lipidosis is very common in cats. Amyloidosis, diabetes mellitus, hepatitis, fulminant hepatitis, congestion due to congestive heart failure, neoplasia. In all these conditions, you will have hepatomegaly. Focal or lobar hepatomegaly. Only certain areas are enlarged, or only one lobe is enlarged. You find in metastatic diseases. And hematomas. Hematomas is very, very easy to diagnose while you are, scanning the liver. The margin will be undulated in hematomas. Abscesses, again, very easy to diagnose. Granulomas, they are all focal diseases. Okay, it's only found in certain lobes. Lobar torsion. Of course, lobar torsion is very important. When you look for lobar torsion, you'll have to find Doppler. So the flow of blood will not be there in lobar torsion. Thrombosis is very, very important, when you're seeing hepatomegaly. So they can cause severe hepatomegaly. When there's a microhepatica, it's a diagnostic of cirrhosis, portovenicable shunts, especially extra blood vessel shunting from outside the liver, extrahepatic shunts, and fibrosis. And all these things you'll find microhepatica. Diffuse parenchymal disease. So we have diffuse parenchymal disease, cholangiohepatitis, very common in cats, early metastatic disease. So the whole, the lesion will be diffuse. Fatty infiltration, storage disease, especially copper and iron, toxic hepatopathies, any toxic fungal, algae, aflatoxin, all these toxic hepatopathies, you have a diffuse pattern. Lipidosis, you find hepatomegaly, hyperechoic, highly hyperechoic, rounded borders, and hyperattenuation. What is hyperattenuation? The the intensity of the echogenicity will reduce when it goes away from the liver. That's called hyperattenuation. Very, very characteristic in lipidosis. Inflammatory disease, diffusely hypoechogenic. The whole liver looks very hypoechogenic. Acute hepatitis and cholangiohepatitis, hypoechoic, and with a hyperechoic portal vein walls. So whenever there is hypoechoic liver, with portal vein walls are looking brighter. It's a relative. So hypoechoic liver with hyperechoic portal veins are characteristic of acute hepatitis and cholangiohepatitis. Chronic inflammation, there are hyperechoic or fixed echogenicity. Cirrhosis, fibrosis, highly hyperechoic, and a small liver. Focal parenchymal disease, necrosis, there can be necrosis, there can be neoplasms, there can be cystic, there can be granulomas, there can be liver lobe torsions. Neoplastic diseases can be a diffuse, focal, multifocal lesions. If it is diffuse, either it is lymphoma or mast cell tumors. Benign nodules can be, differentiated from malignant nodules by, not to a very great extent, but to some extent. If the lesions are less than 1 centimeter, nodules are less than 1 centimeter, it's benign. And if it is more than 1 centimeter, it can be thought about malignant nodules. Because, basically when you have a nodule, you should know whether it is a benign nodule or a malignant nodule. All aged animals will have benign nodules. It doesn't require any surgical intervention or chemotherapy or anything like that. It just requires some supportive therapy. But whereas if it is malignant nodules, might be you'll have to go in for chemo. Okay, and or at least you should give them a prognosis. So you should be able to differentiate whether it is a benign nodule or a malignant nodule. Hypo or malignant nodules are hyperechoic. Target lesions, like MACP and outer inner circles. That is what is called target lesions. Very, very characteristic of malignant nodules and poorly defined nodules. We'll see some pictures. See, these are all diffuse liver tumors. It can be, seen as deviating from the normal contour, or it can be diffusely hyperechoic, even compared to renal cortex. You can see how to compare with the cortex, renal cortex. Say it can be multifocal, like this, it's a lymphosarcoma of the liver. It can be a liver cirrhosis. The borders are all, different. See, nodular liver cirrhosis. The borders are not smooth. When you find, you have also, in this case, you have also ascites. The liver capsule is floating in the ascitic fluid and the borders are all irregular. Usually in a normal animal, it will be very, very perfect line. So here it is undulated. It's very characteristic of nodular liver cirrhosis. Liver abscess, you have a gallbladder and you have abscess, and sometimes you may contain ipsiated particles inside, which is floating in abscess. So we can diagnose liver abscess.
Hatred Pharma introduces Rantiraj syrup. Ranitidine hydrochloride 25 mg per 5 ml. Ideal antacid with the convenience of small dosage to our tiny pet clients. Ranitidine hydrochloride syrup, Rantiraj syrup. H2 receptor antagonist prokinetic systemic drug. Indications: erosive gastritis and esophageal reflux. Dosage for dogs: 1 to 2 mg per kg twice a day. For cats, 3.5 mg per kg twice a day. Route: oral. Presentation: 100 ml. You can book your order online at www.hatwit.com. Looking forward to a long-lasting business association. Thank you.
Next, come to biliary disease. You have cystic diseases, you have cholestasis, you have cholangitis or gallbladder diseases. So again, a biliary system, you have a gallbladder, you have hepatic ducts, you have a cystic duct. The hepatic duct is the one the gallbladder has got within the liver, and the bile duct is the one which is emanating from the gallbladder, from the liver, which enters into the duodenum. So you should know the major duodenal papilla, pancreatic duct, duodenum. All these structures you should remember, because problem anywhere in the duodenum or where the entry or a pancreatic duct or bile duct or hepatic duct or a cystic duct, problem can be there anywhere. There can be obstruction anywhere, and so you should know a thorough history of the biliary system. Cysts are sharply defined borders, can be round or irregular, may contain hyperechoic septa in them. And the coliliths are hyperechoic, the stones are hyperechoic. There is acoustic shadowing. You know very well, whenever there is a foreign body, you have acoustic shadowing. Shadowing is immediately beneath the foreign body, you have a shadow. That is called acoustic shadowing. So this is a gallbladder stone, and you find the shadow directly beneath that. And you have the gallbladder wall is thickened, and you have the bile fluid inside, which is anechoic, and the stone is hyperechoic with the acoustic shadowing. So this is a very classical, picture of a stone with acoustic shadowing, the gallbladder wall thickening. Gallbladder mucocele. Mucocele is, again another disease, intrahepatic cholestatic disease, and you have a kiwi fruit pattern. But from the central edge region, you have radiating stripes, hyperechoic stripes, like a kiwi fruit, cut section of the kiwi fruit. This is very classical picture of gallbladder mucocele. Distension of hepatic ducts, loss of continuity. Sometimes this gallbladder wall can rupture and there can be free peritoneal fluid. The free peritoneal fluid also can be successfully seen in ultrasound, and loss of continuity of GB gallbladder also can be seen in gallbladder wall rupture. Of course, it is a very serious disease than gallbladder mucocele, because it can cause biliary, severe disease which causes sepsis. Okay, so it can cause, it's a peracute disease, rupture of the gallbladder, can cause bile peritonitis. This is called a gallbladder sludge. This is also an incidental memo. Sometimes it's incidental finding, but if you have jaundice and if you have serum alkaline phosphatase increase, if you have bilirubin increase, this can be the cause of intrahepatic cholestasis. So definitely surgery is required, either to remove the gallbladder or to flush the gallbladder. Vascular disease. So venous congestion of liver. It can be due to cardiac disease, right atrial mass, pericardial effusion, vena cava tumors, congestive heart failure. All these things can cause severe venous congestion of liver. And what are the ultrasound findings? Hepatic veins are dilated. They look bigger than normal. There's hepatomegaly, hyperechoic liver, ascites, and high velocity flow of blood in the hepatic vein seen through a Doppler. These are all very characteristic finding of congestion of liver due to cardiac disease. Then portal vena cava shunts. So usually in extrahepatic portal hypertension, you have a small liver, microhepatica. In intrahepatic portal shunts, you have megaly, okay, hepatomegaly. Okay. And most important thing, whenever you find portovena cava shunt, suspect shunt, you also get bilateral renomegaly, nephrocalcinosis, nephrolith, cystolith, all due to urate crystals, biurate crystals. So you should be seeing for them. Of course, in portovena shunt, you also have ascites. And the shunting vessels are tortuous. I told you, the vena cava should be followed entire length till the kidney, from the diaphragm to the kidney, to find which vessel is coming and joining and causing shunt. It can be a gastric artery, it can be a epiploic artery, it can be a splenic artery, it can be even an artery which comes from the bladder. So we should find the entire length of this one and find out where it is joining, and we'll have to see through the Doppler to see high velocity flow. All these things should be seen. Ascites is seen in portovena cava shunts, and shunting vessels are usually very tortuous and they have high velocity of flow. Then portal hypertension. I told you about portal hypertension, first itself. Prehepatic portal hypertension. So portal vein thrombosis. So entire vena cava, try and see them. See this one. See for thrombosis. Thrombosis is well formed and hyperechoic. Inside a black tube, you find a small hyperechoic area, like a small round, and you won't have acoustic shadowing. That is portal vein thrombosis. Portal vein compression due to mass. Sometimes portal vein can be compressed from a mass outside. It can be a testicular tumor, retained testicular tumor. Testis which is there in the abdomen would have become a tumor and compress the portal vein. It can cause portal hypertension. AV fistulas, lymph nodes, any serious infection cause lymphadenopathy and compress the portal vein. Chronic liver disease. Okay, the first three are pre-hepatic portal hypertension. The chronic liver disease leads to cirrhosis is a portal hypertension, where you find hyperechoic area, nodular, ascites, all these things you find and suspect portal hypertension, hepatic portal hypertension. diffuse nodular regeneration, infiltrative neoplasia of the liver. All these last three can be due to hepatic portal hypertension. See, this is hepatic congestion. See the dilated portal vein and see the hyperechoic, liver. It's very characteristic of hepatic congestion. Of course, other tests, urine analysis, very important, to see urobilinogen or increased, bilirubin in the urine. See, again, is very important. If you find bilirubin in the urine of a dog, it is not pathognomonic for liver disease. If you find them in cat, it is pathognomonic for liver disease. So presence of bilirubin in the urine is very, very characteristic for hepatic disease in cats, but not so in dogs. Need not be in dogs. Yeah, absence of urobilinogen is very important. Obstructive jaundice, absence of urobilinogen, very, very characteristics. You look for urine analysis and find out about urine protein ratio and creatinine ratio to find out if it has got hypoalbuminemia, which has got protein losing enteropathy. Then you have you can look for urine specific gravity is very, very less in case of shunts. You have crystals in case of shunts. So urine analysis, which is very simple test, can yield a lot of information on liver diseases, and it helps you to differentiate between liver disease and renal disease when you have hypoproteinemia and hypoalbuminemia. Okay, peritoneal fluid analysis is again very, very important. When you have peritoneal fluid analysis, it can say it's got a transudate or exudate or modified transudate, whether it is because of pre-hepatic portal hypertension or hepatic portal hypertension or post-hepatic portal hypertension, sometimes bile peritonitis, sometimes peritonitis because of perforations. All these things you will be able to find out from peritoneal fluid analysis. If you find the peritoneal fluid, ascitic fluid, low granularity and low specific gravity, it can be low protein and low cellularity, it can be pre-portal hypertension. It can be moderate protein and moderate cellularity, it can be hepatic portal hypertension. If it is very high protein and high cellular level, then it can be post-hepatic portal hypertension. So you'll be able to judge from the peritoneal fluid analysis whether it is a liver or it is a pre-liver or it is a cardiac disease which is causing ascites. So effusion, it can be a chylothorax or this thing, or whether it is a transudate or modified transudate or whether it's inflammatory. Based on that, you can find out if it's a cardiac disease or liver disease or pre-hepatic disease. Okay, then we come to treatment of liver disease. Again, the basic treatment of liver disease is to eliminate the causative agent, suppress the mechanism that potentiates the disease, and provide optimum conditions for hepatic regeneration and control manifestations of complications that can occur, like hepatic encephalopathy. So specific therapies in liver disease are drug-induced, where you recognize them and withdraw the drugs. Most important are acetaminophen or drugs used for epilepsy, or drugs like azole group of drugs, ketoconazole. All these drugs, primidone, all these drugs can cause hepatic problem, and those can be withdrawn. Bacterial hepatitis, cholangitis, and septicemia. Again, we'll have to use antibiotics. We'll see what antibiotics. Idiopathic chronic hepatitis, which is a very, very common finding. You can go in for steroids and colchicine. We'll see what is colchicine. It's available, but very less available and less utilized by veterinarians. I do not know why. Colchicine is a drug which stops mitosis, used by pathologists. So any fibrotic disease or whether it is necrotic disease, if you use colchicine, the progression of liver disease can be stopped when using colchicine. Otherwise, it's idiopathic chronic hepatitis, we'll go in for cirrhosis. Cholestasis, whenever there is cholestasis, you can use ursodeoxycholic acid. This drug, reduces the inflammation. It has got immunomodulating effect. It, makes the bile flow easily. There's so many uses for this drug. Whenever you have cholestasis, you can use ursodeoxycholic acid. Copper toxicity. I already told you, Bedlington Terriers are highly prone for copper storage disease. Okay, and you have secondary copper storage disease, which is very common in case Dobermans, the Labradors, and Golden Retrievers. Whereas any chronic hepatitis in these breeds, which are again very prominent breeds which can have chronic hepatitis, then this copper can be stored and can cause excess toxicity. So always whenever you're treating Labrador, Golden Retriever, and Doberman, if you suspect some degree of hepatic involvement like ALT increase or ALP increase, if you find any changes in the ultrasound, always use these drugs. D-penicillinamide is an excellent drug. Vitamin C is an excellent drug, easily available. Trientine is the gold standard. Zinc acetate, these are all copper chelators. They bind copper. Then hepatic lipidosis, usually very common in cats, not so much in dogs, but treat pre-existing disease, which can cause lipidosis like diabetes mellitus. Lipotropic agents, choline chloride is an excellent drug, which can cause, to remove this lipidosis. Protein modification, you can directly go in for hepatic resource and commercially available hepatic diet, or go in for highly digestible protein, high biological value. See, there was a time when they were saying protein restriction is very important. Protein should not be given, but it's not so. Protein is very important. So you'll have to give a high biological value protein, and if it has got hepatic encephalopathy, then you should restrict protein to a large extent. Carbohydrates, easily digestible carbohydrate. Fat, you should restrict them only in case of obstructive liver disease, obstructive biliary tract disease. Only in that you'll have to restrict fat, otherwise fat is required. Provide essential fatty acid, fat-soluble vitamins, because they are the one which are produced in the liver. Vitamin and mineral supplementation are very important. Hepatic encephalopathy, whenever you find the animal showing bizarre symptoms like seizures, head pressing, going around in circles because of hepatic problem, it is hepatic encephalopathy. Treat dehydration and GI bleed. Use mucosal protectants. I will tell you about GI protectants. Then diet restriction with protein restriction, antibiotics, lactulose either orally or rectally as an enema. Lactulose can be given to reduce the ammonia, and reduce hepatic encephalopathy. Ascites and edema, low sodium diet, diuretics. You can do paracentesis. You can go in for albumin infusion, or you can go in for plasma infusion. So measure the body width around the highest area, body weight, abdominal girth where it is highest. Look for PCV, TS, and BUN, so that you can always govern the hydration status. And start with spironolactone, 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg, BID 3 to 4 days. If it is not coming down, then you can include furosemide. So furosemide, the only problem is, potassium should be monitored. And not only that, when you're giving furosemide, they trap ammonia, which is again, determined to the liver's health. So furosemide should be, used less often, but they are the very powerful diuretics. Spironolactone is a very good drug for hepatic disease, but their action is very slow. So if you can combine spironolactone and furosemide, there are drugs available with both spironolactone and furosemide that you can use, or you use spironolactone first and then later on, if it is not responding, and use furosemide and taper to the lowest effective dose. If no response, but PCV, total solids, BUN are stable, again continue with spironolactone for another 5 days. No response, furosemide again. Watch for hypokalemia and dehydration.
Hatford Pharma introduces Hatlac Plus tablets. the most needed prebiotic along with probiotic for gastrointestinal comfort. Prebiotic and probiotic tablets, Hatlac Plus tablets. Each uncoated tablet contains Bacillus spores 2 billion, Bifidobacterium longum 1 billion, Lactobacillus rhamnosus 1 billion, Lactobacillus acidophilus 500 million, Bifidobacterium lactis 275 million, Saccharomyces boulardii 30 million, Fructooligosaccharides 100 mg. Indications: gastrointestinal support, weaning, during and after antibiotics, in conjunction with allergy treatment after GI surgery. Dosage for dogs: body weight less than 10 kg, 1 tablet once a day. Body weight greater than 10 kg, 1 tablet twice a day. Route: oral. Presentation: 1 into 10 tablets. You can book your order online at www.hatred.com. Looking forward to a long-lasting business association. Thank you.
If they do not, respond to diuretic therapy and salt restriction, then go for colloid administration to some extent. Plasma is the best, but expense cost is there, or human albumin is still better, but they're very, very expensive. So you need to know they can go for plasma or human albumin or, only colloid. Depends on all these things. Therapeutic abdominasis, many times people ask whether we should remove the fluid. In my opinion, it should never ever be opened. It's removed because the moment you remove the abdominal ascitic fluid, it is a high protein fluid. So the oncotic pressure falls down and immediately there will be much more fluid formed than before. Okay, so in my opinion, it should not be removed. But whenever it causes severe dyspnea, you have to remove. So you can use 18 or 16 gram catheter and remove. And it can improve the efficiency of the diuretics when you are doing. You can give lacilactone and do abdominocentesis. It can increase the efficiency. So there is a risk of infection, bleeding, and loss of albumin, and cause hypotension and loss of oncotic pressure, drop in oncotic pressure. All these are all the problems. And of course, sometimes you can, if it is going to cause severe dyspnea, then you can remove the abdominal fluid doing a synthesis and give them plasma. Okay, that's the only way. Or they have tried trying to do fistulas and reintroduce this abdominal fluid into the venous return. But those things have never proved successful even in human beings. So I don't think anybody has done in India so far, but such anecdotal reports are there. Or even anecdotal reports of, removing the fluid, abdominal fluid, aseptically and giving it intravenously back. That was also there in a lot of anecdotal reports are there, but nothing is very successful in treating liver disease. Hepatic crisis, hemorrhage and anemia. If you have vitamin K injections are very important, blood transfusion, anabolic steroids, H2 blockers. We'll see what are them. Vitamin K deficiency possible reduce hepatic function or cholestasis. Mostly obstructive liver disease, you have to give vitamin K. Major bile duct obstruction, you can give 5 to 15 milligram into 3 doses. So that is very important. How to give vitamin K, and it should be given intramuscularly. Very important. You can't give intravenously because it can cause severe anaphylaxis. Cats 5 milligram or 0.5 to 1.5 milligram per kg intramuscularly, 3 doses every 12th hourly, then 1 to 2 weeks per week orally until recovery. Then hepatic coma, intravenous fluids, enema, steroids, and mannitol. Then nutraceutical drugs, again, we'll see what are they, SAMI, silymarin, liver protectants, we'll see what are them. And when to consider antibiotic therapy in liver disease. Increased risk of infection, whenever there is increased risk of infection, extrahepatic bile duct obstruction, chronic liver disease with portal hypertension, where you have ascites, compromised hepatic perfusion, and bile flow, enteric bacterial translocation, bowel disease, bacterial dysbiosis, splanchnic hypoperfusion. All this condition you have to give antibiotic. In the absence of culture and sensitivity, cover aerobic and anaerobic enteric organism, beta-lactamase resistant penicillins or metronidazole or clindamycin, plus aminoglycosides or fluorinated quinolones, and start the treatment before therapy if extrahepatic bile duct obstruction or known infection is there. Antibiotics that achieve therapeutic concentration in liver and bile and renal excretion, amoxicillin 11 to 20 milligram per kg, cephaloxacin 15 milligram per kg orally or subcutaneously or intravenously, endotoxin again 2.5 to 5 milligram per kg orally or parenterally, BID. Metronidazole dose 7.5 milligram per kg orally, IV, can give it. Metronidazole lacks enema with water. It also can be done. Liver dose is very less, so you should be very careful. And overdose can cause cerebellar central vestibular signs. Antibiotics to avoid, tetracyclines, because there is a double intrahepatic recycle of tetracyclines. So it should be avoided, incomycin, erythromycin, potentiated sulfas. Okay, and they are either inactivated by liver or require hepatic metabolism or can cause injury to the liver. So you should avoid tetracyclines and potentiated sulfas. Then gastric protectants, cimetidine is not used because suppression of cytochrome P450 oxidase. Ester receptor, other famotidine, ranitidine can be used. Famotidine can be used as a gastric protectant in gastric bleeds. Proton pump inhibitors, omeprazole, can be used. And the dose is specific for liver disease, where 0.7 to 2 milligram per kg SID. I already told you in the last lecture, omeprazole can be given as a single dose drug. Metoclopramide, again, is very important. The normal dose is 0.2 to 0.4 milligram, but in case of hepatic disease, you have to give 0.75 to 1.5 milligram per kg as a CRI, or as when you give orally, you can 0.13 to 0.03 milligram orally. Ondansetron, again, whenever there is severe vomiting and hepatic diseases, you can go in for ondansetron. Dose is 0.1 to 1 milligram per kg orally BID. Because the dose should be reduced because it is being eliminated by the liver. Glucocorticoids are excellent drugs in hepatic diffuse hepatic chronic hepatic diseases, chronic active hepatitis. Antifibrotic, though is weak. Non-septic active inflammation. Immunologic injuries, promote bile flows, appetite stimulants, side effects, or sodium water retention. Any glucocorticoids, sodium water retention is there. It can enhance your ascites. Catabolism is enhanced. Increased susceptibility to infection because immunosuppression. GI ulceration because of any non-steroidal steroids causes GI ulcerations. If ascites or edema are a problem, use glucocorticoids that lack mineralocorticoid activity. So if you've got ascites, then you can already have got ascites and you can enhance glucocorticoids can increase. Therefore, you can go for dexamethasone. Azothioprine, immunosuppressive drug, more expensive than prednisolone. Steroid sparing drug, which you've already seen in the previous lecture. So you can combine azothioprine and glucocorticoids. I already told you about this azodeoxycholic acid. Whenever you have a cholestatic disease, you can go add this azodeoxycholic acid, non-toxic hydrophilic bile acids, colorectic, decreases proportion of toxic bile acids, reduces immune response, increased production of glutathione, and of course, contraindicated in extrahepatic bile duct obstruction. It is only good for intrahepatic cholestasis. Okay, it's indicated in cholestatic disorders. Antioxidants, vitamin C, S-adenosine L-methionine, vitamin E, silymarin, N-acetylcysteine, zinc, azodeoxycholic acid. These are all antioxidants, and their value antioxidants, which scavenge the free oxygen radicals. Their actions are very well known, and they can be really very useful in treating. SAMe is, precursor of cysteine, one of amino acids that makes up glutathione. The defense mechanism against oxidative stress. So it is very, very good in ongoing hepatic necrosis. This adenosyl L-methionine is very good. 20 milligram per kg body weight SID given in empty stomach, and it should not be given in empty stomach. It should be given along with food. Silymarin is an excellent photoprotective drug extracted from milk thistle. It's an excellent free radical scavenger. It's a main defense against oxidative damages. It's very good for cholestatic diseases, and that's anti-inflammatory drug in chronic active hepatitis. It's very good for paracetamol intoxication, both in dogs and cats. Okay, and they don't have side effects. Vitamin E, excellent drug, 10 to 15 injections per day orally, indicated in liver disease associated with oxidative injury, anti-inflammatory properties it has got. It is good for copper toxicity, paracetamol toxicity, bile duct obstruction, etc. N-acetylcysteine is a cytoprotective drug along with SAMe and azodeoxycholic acid, silymarin and vitamin E. It can be given. It's an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, improves hepatic circulation, blood circulation, improves oxygen delivery to the hepatic tissues, 140 milligram per kg IV once, then 70 milligram per kg quarterly for the next day. It can be given. Antifibrotic drugs, main thing is colchicine. As I already told you about colchicine. It is an antimitotic drug used, stimulates collagenase, and of course we have some side effects, but still they are not very profound. The dose is 0.025 to 0.3 milligram per kg body weight once daily, then every other alternate day. So first start with once a day and then every other alternate day. They say it is okay, but we don't have lots of reports of using colchicine in India. Anti-copper medications, I already told you, Bedlington Terriers, then of course Dalmatians, Labradors, Dobermans, and Golden Retrievers. They all cause. We don't have testing for this disease. Only a way to diagnose them or histopathology, again not done in our country. But if you suspect any chronic active hepatitis in Dobermans, Labradors, Golden Retrievers, any of those breeds, you can always use these anti-copper medications because they do not have any other side effects, okay? Like D-penicillamine, Phenetin, at the rate of 10 to 15 milligram per kg BID, along with food, can be given. So copper chelating agents. Zinc is a gluconate or acetate, and 1 hour before meals, 10 milligram elemental zinc per kg twice daily. The take-home message is, liver is a organ which has got multifunctional capabilities, and therefore they show bizarre functions, and so you should know how to do a clinical examination and specific attention in high-risk breeds. You should know that it's got non-specific clinical signs. And when you have clinical signs of jaundice and ascites, rule out all extra causes other than hepatic disease which can cause them, okay, especially in jaundice and ascites. I told you already, ascites due to liver disease is very, very less. And, without seeing an ultrasound picture of cirrhotic liver, don't go for treating liver disease. Okay? Therefore, it's very important. Increased ALT, I already told you about the pretenders, ALT and ALP. So think about cardiac disease, think about hypertensive rule out extrahepatic causes, avoid and reduce hepatotoxic drugs whenever you suspect hepatic disease. Thank you.
Hatfield Pharma Private Limited is a pharmaceutical company with its head office at Meerut. It was founded on 29 January 2019 with a vision to provide affordable and quality veterinary medicine to our pet parents. Hatfield Pharma is doing marketing of veterinary pharmaceuticals throughout India. In a small span of 1 year, we have launched 51 products in the veterinary pharma industry to serve our clients. In future 1 year, we are planning to have a product basket of more than 100 products. Hatfield is different from other veterinary pharma companies as we don't have distribution channel. We understand the latest needs of market, and for this reason we have adapted to online module of selling our drugs to field practitioners. We are serving our clients by providing the required medicines at their doorstep without any middleman. We directly collect orders online, mobile app, WhatsApp, telephonic from our end customers, and we deliver the required products to their doorstep through our nationwide logistic partners Blue Dart, DTDC, TCI Express. We are happy to announce that in our client list, most of the leading pet practitioners of India are included. To assure the unbreakable faith of our clients in our company products, we look after the quality of products, starting from selecting the raw material for our final products, aseptic precautions during manufacturing, and proper storage of finished products till supply to the end customers to ensure quality of products. We are happy to share that Hatfield Pharma has been recognized at various business platforms. Recently, an article on Hatfield Pharma has been published in the leading business magazine Business Connect. One more milestone in the success story for Hatfield Pharma is that the managing director of the company, Dr. Rajneesh Tyagi, has been awarded Young Asian Entrepreneurs Award at Bangkok, Thailand on 7 February 2020. Our vision states Hatfield Pharma to be a commercially viable leading veterinary pharmaceutical company in providing quality products affordable to various sections of the pet owners society. Our endeavor is to be a front runner in innovation and quality in the veterinary pharma industry. We see a very bright future for our company as we are working in pet industry, which itself is growing at a higher rate, approximate growth of 20% annually. We are regularly working on the knowing of needs of our customers to serve them in a better way. We value your support to Hatfield Pharma and are very thankful to all of you. We look forward for a very strong and long business association between veterinarians and Hatfield Pharma. Thank you.